Hello and welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to do a recap of a British period, romance and drama film called Pride and Prejudice from 2005. But before we begin, beware of spoilers and enjoy the video. Elizabeth Lizzie Bennet is the second born of 5 daughters. Her family lives a comfortable life on their estate known as Longbourn. However, English laws of the early 19th century only allow men to inherit an estate, not women. The Bennet girls will be homeless and penniless upon the death of their father. Despite this threat, Elizabeth and some of her sisters still dream of marriage for love. Elizabeth is a witty, stubborn girl. She is the favorite of her clever yet weary father. Jane, the eldest daughter, is the family beauty. She is as kind as she is beautiful. The younger sisters lack the maturity and social awareness of the older two. Lydia and Kitty are boy crazy and beyond silly, not unlike their mother. Mary is serious but socially inept. When an eligible bachelor rents the nearby estate, Netherfield, the pressure to find a husband of means is intensified for the Bennet sisters. At a ball, they meet Charles Bingley, his haughty sister, Caroline, and their dear family friend, Mr. Darcy. Elizabeth's first impression of Darcy is not good. She finds him to be conceited and insulting. Mr. Darcy sulks the entire evening and refuses to dance with anyone. Though he tries to hide it, Darcy is curious about Elizabeth. She is different from the other ladies. Mr. Bingley takes an instant liking to Jane Bennet. The two are inseparable the entire evening. The rest of the Bennet family manages to embarrass themselves in one way or another. Then the next day, Caroline Bingley invites Jane to dine with her. Even though a storm is brewing, her mother makes her go on horseback. Jane abides by her mother, but the rain pours on her. As a triumph for her mother, Jane catches a severe cold and must stay at Netherfield for a few days. Elizabeth also stays with the Bingleys to look after her sister. In the evening, Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy continue to squabble over minor things such as what defines a woman as accomplished. Caroline maintains a rude aloofness toward Elizabeth unless trying to draw the attention of Mr. Darcy. After Lizzie and a recovered Jane return home, Mr. Collins arrives at Longbourn. He is an arrogant, bumbling man. He clumsily makes clear his intention to find a bride from one of the Bennet daughters. He steers away from Jane and sets his sights on Elizabeth. While in town purchasing ribbons, Elizabeth and her sisters make the acquaintance of a soldier named Mr. Wickham. Lizzie's first impression of him is that he is an easygoing, worthy man. The younger Bennet girls flirt with him mercilessly. While walking, the group encounters Bingley and Darcy. It was clear that Darcy dislikes Wickham. When Darcy storms off without any civility, Wickham spins a sinister tale. He reveals that he and Darcy were boyhood friends and as close as brothers until Darcy denied him the living the late senior Darcy desired him to have. Elizabeth's dislike for Mr. Darcy increases. Mr. Collins accompanies the family to yet another ball where he is also an embarrassment. Lizzie looked forward to seeing Mr. Wickham, but he didn't show up. After dancing with Mr. Collins, Mr. Darcy requests a dance that shocks her. As they dance and banter, Elizabeth makes it known to Darcy that she disapproves of his treatment of Wickham. As the Bennet family leaves, Bingley's sister hammers in that she disapproves of Charles' attachment to Jane. Later, Mr. Collins obtusely proposes to Elizabeth, who rejects him. This infuriates Mrs. Bennet. She tells her that she will never speak to her again. Her father claims that he wouldn't speak to her if she did marry him. Jane receives a curt letter from Caroline Bingley that they are closing Netherfield. This devastates Jane and confuses everyone. They were sure Mr. Bingley was falling in love with Jane. Elizabeth's dear friend, Charlotte Lucas, visits Elizabeth. Charlotte shares that she has accepted a proposal from Mr. Collins. Elizabeth can't hide her disappointment. Charlotte explains that at 27, she doesn't want to burden her family anymore. She feels she will be happier than Mrs. Collins. Jane travels to London to visit her aunt and uncle in the hopes of seeing Mr. Bingley. Unfortunately, this does not happen. Elizabeth visits the new Mrs. Charlotte Collins at Rosings. Charlotte confesses that she avoids her husband as much as possible and is quite happy running home. Lady Catherine de Bourgh invites Collins and Lizzie to her grand mansion. Mr. Darcy's presence surprises Elizabeth. He is the nephew of the lady and the intended husband of the sickly Anne de Bourgh. Lady de Bourgh is rude and meddling. For the first time, Elizabeth and Darcy have a civil conversation. She playfully tells his cousin, Colonel Fitzwilliam, how rudely Darcy behaved when they met. Darcy explains that he is not good at conversing with strangers. Elizabeth suggests that he practice, as she should practice playing music. The next day, Mr. Darcy comes to the house, seeming to want to speak to Lizzie, but is then totally tongue-tied and unable to express himself. He leaves in an apparent state of confusion and agitation. Lizzie returns home. Jane is also home from London, having failed to find Mr. Bingley. She tells Lizzie, not very convincingly, that she is quite over her attraction to Bingley. She asks Lizzie whether there is any news from the visit with Charlotte. Lizzie says no, she lies. She specifically denies that Darcy had said anything about Bingley. Also, Lydia has been invited by Colonel Forster to go on a trip to the South Coastal Resort at Brighton. Lizzie thinks it is a bad idea. Lydia is immature and impulsive and could get into trouble. Lizzie pleads with her father to forbid it and is furious when he doesn't. The Bennet sisters' aunt and uncle, Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner, are visiting and will be going on a vacation in the Peak District to the north. They invite Lizzie to come with them, and she accepts. While on their travels, Lizzie's aunt and uncle suggest a visit to Pemberley, Darcy's grand estate, which is nearby and is open for visitors. Lizzie is reluctant to be anywhere near the man she hates but consents to the trip when she is told that Darcy is away. Lizzie is utterly awed by the opulence and splendor of the house and grounds, particularly a sculpture gallery. The housekeeper tells the three visitors what a kind, caring, and generous person Mr. Darcy is. Lizzie begins to think that her earlier impression of him may have been wrong. Lizzie peeks into a room where a very young woman is playing the piano. She then sees Darcy enter, and he and the young woman welcome each other and embrace affectionately. Lizzie quickly leaves and goes outside. Darcy follows her and makes an awkward attempt to be conciliatory. He explains that he had returned from his trip early. He offers Lizzie a ride back to the inn where she is staying, but she declines, saying that she will walk. At dinner at the inn, Mr. and Mrs. Gardiner tell Lizzie that Darcy had come to talk to them, seemed to be a very gracious person, and had invited them all to come back to Pemberley the next day so that Mr. Gardiner could go fishing and Lizzie could meet Georgiana. They do so. When Lizzie and Georgiana meet, the latter says, "My brother has told me so much about you. I feel that we are friends already." Darcy then flatters Lizzie into playing piano duets with the much more talented Georgiana. The interaction between Lizzie and Darcy is completely pleasant and amicable this time. The first time that this has happened, Darcy is now finally learning how to speak in a pleasant manner. The Gardiners, Lizzie, and Darcy all go to the inn that evening for dinner. Lizzie receives a letter with the shocking news that Lydia has run away with Mr. Wickham. Darcy blames himself for this, for not having exposed Wickham's perfidy sooner. He then leaves, and the others hurry back to the Bennets' home. Mr. Bennet has gone to London to try to find Lydia and Wickham, and force them to marry. The family is devastated. In that society, an incident like this brings ruin to the entire family. None of them will be able to marry well, and they will lose the estate upon Mr. Bennet's death. Mr. Bennet returns, but Mr. Gardiner is still searching. Then a letter arrives. Mr. Gardiner has found them, and they will get married if Wickham is promised a settlement of £100 per year. Mr. Bennet will pay it, but they are convinced that the actual demand must have been in the thousands and that Mr. Gardiner is paying the bulk of it. The newlyweds then arrive for a visit before going to the north of England, where Wickham will be stationed. At lunch, Lydia lets slip what was supposed to be a secret, that Darcy was at the wedding, and was the one who had found her in Wickham. Lizzie realizes that Darcy had been noble and generous toward the Bennet family and that he must have been the one that paid off Wickham. The Bennets later learn that Mr. Bingley is returning to town. Jane assures Lizzie, not very convincingly, that she has completely gotten over caring about him. Mrs. Bennet also feigns indifference. A short time later, Mr. Bingley arrives at the house, with Darcy and the family frantically cleaning up the messy living room, finishing in the nick of time. Mrs. Bennet, while pretending to be indifferent, is clearly excited at the thought that Bingley will propose to Jane. But the visit is somewhat awkward to all concerned. Bingley and Darcy then walk a short distance from the house, and Darcy helps Bingley rehearse his proposal to Jane. Back at the house, Lizzie begins to realize that Darcy brought Bingley back to town, attempting to repair the damage that he had caused by separating them. She realizes that her negative impression of Darcy had been wrong. Bingley returns and proposes to Jane, and she accepts. The Bennet family is ecstatic that evening until there is a knock on the door. It is Lady de Bourgh. She imperiously demands to speak to Lizzie alone. She tells Lizzie that she has heard a rumor that her nephew Darcy and Lizzie are to be married. She is scandalized that he would ruin the family name by marrying into such a low-class family. She demands that Lizzie promise that the rumor is false and that she will never marry Darcy. Lizzie refuses to do so and tells Lady de Bourgh to leave. Lizzie had been unaware of the rumor and realizes that it must have come from Darcy, and that it means that Darcy is genuinely interested in her. She is so upset at the encounter with Lady de Bourgh that she can't sleep. On an early morning walk, Lizzie stumbles upon Darcy. She thanks him for all he has done. He confesses that he did it only for her and renews his marriage offer. Lizzie graciously accepts this time. The film ends with the happy couple sharing a quiet moment alone. That's all for today. If you liked this video, then please like, share, and comment. Press the bell icon so you don't miss any updates, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Take care and see you next time.